It was like waking up to a calamity. The moment my eyes opened, my senses immediately overloaded. The overwhelming sensation of ultra-intense lights, sounds and smells were somehow amplified by the intense emotion that was still ebbing from that vision. It was so painful I almost screamed, but that shameful act was blocked by my old friend. Regardless, action override. The sensory overload, however, was hardly the end of my troubles. Inside my head mental alarms were blaring out. Potential threats detected. Defensive measures auto-activated. Without prompting, a command pulse burst forth from me and reached out. It grabbed hold onto the aforementioned threats while I was still struggling to make sense of my surroundings. Caution. Immediate attention required. While I was still dazed by the information overload, a mental feedback prompt pulled urgently at my consciousness, screaming for attention. Outraged, I pushed back with a single directive. Leave me alone. My command latched out, tethering itself with lightning speed to any tangible targets to execute my decree. Potential threat disabled. Potential threat disabled. Potential threat disabled. Potential threat disabled. Further attention required. All that happened in the blink of an eye. Just like that, all the prompts went away. Released from the mental pressures but still suffering from sensory overload, I slowly regained my bearing and looked around. I found myself in a huge, dimly lit chamber surrounded by a myriad of devices. The chamber gave the vibe of a religious Gothic setting mixed with futuristic elements, a theme which I was dead familiar with due to my countless hours of diving into books and video games of this universe. It was like witnessing concept arts come to life. The ceiling was high and church-like with numberless religious figures painted on it, whereas the walls and floor had a few gigantic stylized fleur-de-lis symbols. No mistake about it, I must be in a sororitas monastery. Eerily, no one was around in this huge chamber. The air was pleasantly cool, the tranquility of the place was broken only by the muted beeping of machines. At least it should be, but I was still battling with my hypersensitive senses. My vision was saturated with flashing psychedelic colors, traces of medicine and chemicals in the air assaulted my nostrils while the world rumbled with a deafening low hum. I winced and sniffed from the suffocating stimulus until the intensity eventually died down. Finally relieved from the sensory torment, I touched my face and to my surprise, felt some wetness. Blood? I pulled my hand back in shock. I didn't even notice I was still crying. Breathing heavily, I mentally conceded she was correct to forewarn me. The vision was indeed unpleasant and also confirmed what was widely acknowledged in my hobby community, that the Emperor of Mankind can be a total jerk at times. After taking another breath and wiping off my tears, I started observing my surroundings and was immediately stunned by the clarity of my senses. Everything was looking even more real than before. Compared with this vividness, it felt like the past few days when I was active. My then super healthy body was actually under the weather the whole time. Was it really? The shocking answer came quickly. Looking back, I finally realized during the days leading up to the battle with the rebels and the greater demon, my body might have been running on fumes. It was so ridiculous, I must have been like a village bumpkin who got hold of a damaged supercar and felt proud of myself for going 150 miles, without realizing the car can easily go 300 miles in top form. My God, I am still such a bloody noob. After some self-loathing, it was time for information gathering. I reached out but there was no machine spirit around. Nearby, the dimly lit space was illuminated by what seemed to be my vital readings on huge digital displays. I tried to read the information, but to my horror I could not understand them. For a split second I was rudely reminded of being an intruder of this universe before something kicked in, and abruptly the meaning of the Gothic characters came to me perfectly. What the hell was that? I thought whatever instant low Gothic translation mechanism inside my head should be seamless by now. Slightly unnerved, I peeled my eyes from the displays to check on my body and found I was wearing a patient's outfit with a tube inserted into my left arm. Everything seemed fine, all my limbs were accounted for and I could move all my fingers and wiggle my toes freely. From this point of view, laying down and looking at my body was just like That time I was on that muddy field. Suddenly I was on that miserable rainy field again, pain and cold gnawing at me. I looked down to see an atrocious amount of blood flowing out from my nose and mouth. The warm sanguine liquid filled my mouth with a choking taste of iron. I could not breathe, started panicking and grabbed onto my neck. I blinked, and suddenly found myself back on my bed again. No muddy field, no rain, no blood, but my hands were still around my neck. While my mind rallied, I touched my neck and realized my rosette was missing. The possibility of losing such a crucial item jolted my focus back, but a hunch told me it was nearby. I sat up from my bed to look around and, true to my feelings, quickly located it. Just a few steps away, glittering in the dim light on top of a small table, was my rosette. Beneath it was my then outfit, cleaned and neatly folded. Relieved, I climbed down from my futuristic-looking bed to retrieve my stuff. The marble floor was stone cold and a nice chill crept up my feet as I walked over. Just before I was about to reach for my pendant, a nagging sensation grabbed my attention. Intrigued, I looked around as information seeped into my head. It was only then that I realized the place was rigged with a myriad of contraptions that my mind was trying to warn me about. Hanging from the ceiling and aiming at my bed was a brainwave monitor. Mounted high on the walls were multiple motion detectors, and the bed I slept on even had a weight sensor. I could even perceive the infrared anti-theft measures covering my stuff on the table. Everything seemed to be rigged to alert the administrators of the place the moment they detected I had regained consciousness, but nobody was running over to me. Why? Looking closer, I was enlightened by the transcendent intelligence residing in me. All the notification functions on the devices were intercepted by my command pulse from earlier. They were all currently running in a loop pending for my further instructions. That meant my countermeasures ability was activated even before my mind was clear. You are a weapon. The chilling answer in the Emperor's voice jumped at me. Feeling conflicted at that notion and not wishing to alert anyone of me waking up at the moment, I terminated all the command loops. With all the security measures disabled, I slowly picked up my rosette that was in the shape of a golden twin-headed eagle pendant. It was as light as a feather, but I felt the symbolic weight it carried. The pendant shone brightly even in the dim light, bouncing illumination off its exorbitant finishing in a complex and spellbinding manner. The vision never did show how SYRINE got the possession of this item, which made me question if her action here was sanctioned by the Emperor. What if this is a case of running away from home but on a galactic scale? The ramification of such a possibility was no joking matter. I suddenly had the mental image of a few Adeptus Custodes guards materializing beside me with their weapons raised. I had seen the legendary Custodes in my vision, the way they moved, the shine on their burnished gold armor and the sheer intimidating pressure they exuded was still fresh in my mind. Even knowing beforehand that these were imaginary specters, I was taken aback by the intensity of it. I blinked and the mirages of golden giants were gone, leaving me with a heightened pulse. Flustered, I cursed myself for jumping at shadows and decided to change my clothes. I pulled the tube that was still attached to my wrist. It came off with a light sensation and my vital readings on the huge display went flat. Before the built-in alarm started beeping, I made sure to disable its administrator notification function before switching it off with a flick of my mind. I then proceeded to take off my patience's gown. Looking down, I came face to face with heavenly curves.
Oh yeah, I almost forgot. I am a girl, in one of the most brutal sci-fi universes known, no less.
My brain froze and I wanted to cry because of my predicament, but this time the tears were not forthcoming. Feeling distressed, I panted for air despite not feeling out of breath, the reality check on me playing the part of a questionable heiress of a failing galactic empire hit me like a truck. I was just a normal white-collar worker in my previous life. This is too much. Can I run away from all these like SYRINE did? While my mind raced, a small voice rose from inside my head. Weren't you always frustrated about the lack of position, power and resources in life? Here, have everything you always wanted and go make a difference. I looked down at the chained golden eagle pendant that was still on my right hand and slowly clenched it. A short while later, I had cleaned myself, all dressed up and arrived at a sturdy-looking door. The door was decorated with, of course, a myriad of skulls and other common imperial motifs. It seemed to be the only way in and out of this place. Curious about what was on the other side, I fired up Auspex and blasted forth a sensor wave, but no readings came back. What the? I tried a second time and received the same result, but this time I noticed my detection waves disappeared as soon as they hit the door and walls. I realized these were made of either psychic or sensor dampening materials. This chamber has some serious setup. I approached the door and pushed it, finding it locked as expected. A sensation informed me the door was merely locked by a sophisticated digital mechanism, which was weird but made things easy for me. Using my innate ability, I bypassed the security measures, deactivated the digital lock and gingerly pushed the door. The massive door swung open silently, a testament to its supreme craftsmanship, and I was greeted by a dimly lit narrow hallway. I quietly exited the chamber and closed the door, reactivating its lock. Murmurs of prayers mixed with the low hums of power armor backpacks could be heard in the distance, and there was the smell of incense in the air. I fired up another Auspex wave and immediately detected people not too far in front. From the readings I could tell there was a line of sororitas blocking another group of people. While the presence of the sisters was expected, I was taken aback by the second group, some of whom seemed to be prostrating towards my direction. Who are these freaks? I slowly walked forward while taking a closer look at the readings, recognized the symbols of haloed skulls and held back a gasp. These people must be from the Ecclesiarchy, the official church of the Imperium. From my understanding, these guys were usually just bad news, think ultra-corrupt, super self-righteous religious organizations in conservative trappings with the full backing of a supremely fascist state. As I was wondering what to do next, more people approached. Judging by the weight of the steps and the growing hums of power armor, a new group of sisters had arrived. Sister Palatine, good morning. A male voice echoed from the hallway, addressing the newcomers. Good morning, esteemed Archdeacon, replied a female voice which I recognized to be Palatine Domine, who I had met once. She had a uniquely pitched voice. Your Grace is here very early today. How may I serve? While Domine sounded courteous enough, I felt a hint of coldness in her tone. Palatine, this time I will accompany you in the routine inspection of the Saint Candidate's condition. Archdeacon, I again humbly request your eminence not to be involved in such matters. Should the Holy Daughter regain consciousness, we will notify the Church immediately. Please retire and wait for our notification. Not possible. The latest astropathic message from the Cardinal has made his orders clear. By his decree as the highest ecclesiarchy office on Nusquam, thus representing the Emperor's will, the Church has to have the first word with the candidate when she recovers. It is now my sole and only task. I am to personally monitor her condition closely from this point onward and supervise her inspections. There was a pause before Domine replied, My apologies, Archdeacon, again I must refuse your request. Without explicit written order from the Church authorized by the Cardinal, I cannot overrule the orders of my canonus. I understand, that is why this time I have here with me the written order here with the Church's seal, attached together with the transcripts of the Cardinal's direct orders. Kindly verify. This is. There was another pause before Domine complied with a flat tone that almost masked her displeasure. Very well, follow me. I then heard the sisters parting and people started moving, and it was only then I realized my predicament. I am not supposed to be here. Shit. Trapped. I was so trapped. This situation of being cornered in a narrow walkway seemed awfully familiar though. Just as I was seconds away from an embarrassing encounter with a bunch of troublesome people, a line of words showed up like a savior in my vision. Activate Shadow Walk? Yes/no. After I made the obvious choice, a thin, almost unperceivable shroud appeared around me just as Palatine Domine came into view, her face an icy fortress as she led a few sister hospitallers together with a whole group of religious-looking people walking forward. For a moment I held my breath, but it was soon apparent no one saw me. With my back on the wall, I watched in awkward silence as the ecclesiastical procession walked right past me, their many delicate religious trinkets ringing softly with every step, and a cloud of incense followed them towards the chamber. I felt my head numbing just by imagining what would happen when they found out their holy daughter was no longer inside. I gotta get out of here. In front of me was the path leading outside. With my newfound ability and my transhuman agility, I could probably get out of this place undetected. I looked back at the procession again and found myself absolutely not in the mood to deal with religious bureaucracy. In stark contrast, the promise of a short span of freedom in front was just too tempting. Come hell and high water, I will go for a walk first. Maintaining my shroud, I walked down the hallway, past a line of guarding sisters, and ventured into the vast monastery. I moved like a ghost inside the sororitas' monastery. Even with my shroud, at first I was still apprehensive whenever I encountered random groups of sisters. But soon it was clear that no one so much as threw me a glance. I was practically invisible to the human eyes. I proceeded with my walk and felt like a lost tourist visiting a holy site, marveling at the impressive interior of the place. All around me, every inch of the floors, walls and ceilings were covered with patterns, carvings and reliefs of religious and imperial motifs in the signature dark Gothic theme of the Imperium. Another surprising fact was that while the place was huge, there was little to no electronic security surveillance presence in most areas. I was paying extra attention to look out for security cameras, for I highly suspected this shroud of mine could not fool machines, as this should be equal to or the same legendary ability utilized by the stealthy Raven Guard Space Marines. By now the ruse was up. I could feel the increased Vox traffic in the air and an obvious increase in the number of battle sisters marching around with sterner than usual expressions. Curious about what they were talking about on the Vox, I dove into the network for a peek and almost instantly regretted it. It sounded like the whole monastery was freaking out. They were screaming mobilization orders and putting all available sisters into a search. Maybe this accidental stunt of mine went a bit too far. The idea of looking for Alisaya or Diadina did cross my mind, but I had no idea where to even begin. I walked aimlessly, wondering what to do next, but seemed to be drawn towards a particular direction. There was something in the air, a residue of something powerful calling out to me like the faintest whisper in a dream. I soon found myself inside a huge service hall of sorts with an eye-catching life-sized statue in the center of it. It was of a lady clad in a standard suit of sororitas power armor. She wore a fierce expression, standing heroically on top of a high marble slab with an iron halo behind her head, holding a huge shield on her left hand while a blade was raised on the other. The plaque on the marble read, Catherine Eliseus, patron saint of the Order of Our Martyred Lady, the original Order Militant Majoris which this tiny order splintered from. There was a tall banner and a table in front of the statue. On the table was an incense dispenser and a forest of burning candles, with a collection of religious trinkets commonly carried by the Sisters of Battle. I noticed some of these trinkets were damaged or broken in places. The banner behind the table had lines upon lines of words written on it. On the very top of the banner, written in huge lettering, was a single word, Martyris. As for those lines of words, they were all names. Adelira Genevieve, Lucia Dosimusa, Juliana Nienta, Sabina Lucia, Verodica Agathira, Eliana Desara, Brigania Decimagora, Adelina Karamena, Elenile Geneth. On and on the names went. I felt the hair on my arm rising upon realizing these were all the recently martyred sisters. Did they lose their life before I arrived or in the recent battle under my command? I was not sure, but regardless it made my spine crawl. This was the grim darkness of the far future after all. War was eternal and the Imperium itself was built on countless martyrs. I knew that, but still, the transition from hobby memes to reality had an indescribably surreal quality to it. I held my palms together for a silent prayer, then left the hall, letting my feet carry me forward to no particular place. Damn, I can use some fresh air. I walked and walked. With my shroud I passed more security checkpoints, avoided random Mechanius personnel, dodged security cameras, and walked past more groups of sisters until I was finally out of the monastery wall and got onto a parapet. The cool air outside pleased me. It was refreshing to finally stop breathing air heavily laced with incense. Outside I came upon a starless dark sky with random aircraft lights floating around. I turned around and saw the exterior of the Sororita monastery for the first time. It was a gigantic structure in the shape of a comically huge Gothic church with its main cathedral piercing up into the sky. Around it were multiple lesser towers with many guns protruding from strategic locations. The place was more of a fortress than a monastery. Looking down, I saw a strange sight. Beyond the furthest perimeter wall were what appeared to be a large crowd. There must have been thousands of people near the main gate. With my inhuman eyesight I was picking details like looking through binoculars. In the center of the crowd was a huge figure which appeared to be a statue. Wait, is that what I think it is? I had to get a closer look. The fastest way to get down from here would be. It was only then that I realized my body was in mid-air, and I was looking down at a straight-down drop of at least 3 stories in height. In my eagerness to move forward and without realizing my own actions, I climbed over the parapet. Time slowed down, the human side of me screamed internally while the other unfamiliar side was indifferent about the fall. Then visions of SYRINE's daredevil stunts beneath the Imperial Palace flashed before my mind and the internal conflict was resolved. Yeah, this is nothing. I landed without a hitch and felt no more impact than jumping off a chair. The little landing noise I made attracted the attention of a battle sister from a patrolling squad, but she quickly lost interest seeing no one was around. After my quick recovery from a brief moment of feeling stupor, I looked back at the multiple stories high parapet and immediately gave up on the idea of going back the same way. What now? I teetered between the decisions of getting back inside the monastery or investigating what I saw on the other side of the fence. As I stood in the massive yard feeling totally lost, again my attention was attracted to a powerful yet abstruse force nearby, more intense this time and originated from beyond the fence. This felt weird and eerie. Is it a sign? I closed my eyes and tried to look inward for a quick answer. SYRINE, is this your doing? No response. Well, that was worth a try. My anxiety was starting to rise at this point. This walk had been going on for far too long. I tried looking for a way back into the monastery but instead felt a sense of suffocating oppression just by looking at the formidable structure. In stark contrast, the prospect of checking what was on the other side of the fence looked so tempting. There lies that mysterious thing I saw from the parapet, a fleeting moment of false freedom plus whatever that had attracted my attention. All right, I made up my mind and promised to myself, I will get back right after seeing what was on the other side of the fence. Using my shroud and darkness as cover, I continued my journey through a field and eventually reached the outermost perimeter. Through the fence I saw a huge crowd of pilgrims. The obvious way to get outside was through the main gatehouse guarded by a squad of sisters. I avoided that and checked on the perimeter fences. Looking at the height of the fence, I had a hunch that this was probably not enough of an obstacle for me. But just in case, simulatio activated in my mind's eye, I ran at the fence and jumped. Propelled by my superhuman limbs, I easily leapt right over the fence, even doing a flip while mid-air. I can do this. I exited the simulation and performed the exact feat, landed on the other side. Keeping my shadow walk active, I moved into the crowd of pilgrims, finding myself having to constantly avoid the random people who would be walking straight into me due to my pseudo-invisibility. The familiar scent of incense again filled the air, but this time mixed with the musk of humanity. These people had been here for some time already. I soon reached the center of the crowd and my mouth dropped. No doubt about it, standing close to 2 meters tall with thousands of candles burning beneath it and lighting it up like a gigantic cake in pre-dawn darkness was a statue of my likeness. I gulped while looking at the details. This statue, while slightly crude with hints of being a rushed job, matched my clothing and pose from when I did that cringy solo performance. The most noteworthy feature of it was the glowing halo behind the head, which was made up of illuminating devices. Around the statue were many erected banners. Most had the typical message of "The Emperor protects" or "Faith is our shield" written on them, and the largest of them all red prey for our saint. How long was I out cold? When was I a saint? I stood there, invisible to the crowd and having a hard time keeping my mouth closed while taking the ridiculous sight in. By then the sky was starting to brighten up. Dawn was coming. I let out a sigh and decided it was time to end the walk. I turned and was about to go back when a disturbance caught my attention. A few people were arguing around the corner of the statue and their voices rose steadily. I walked over for a closer look, just in time to witness the start of a fight. A few guys were pummeling an old man while the crowd, including a man who looked like an officer in a carapace armor, simply stood by and watched. Attacked by multiple people, the elder man was having a hard time defending himself from getting punched and kicked from all sides. The old man soon lost his footing and fell to the ground, his possessions scattered around. His assailants did not relent though and kept up their attack. I winced at the barbaric display and wondered why no one intervened. Other people hear this cold? No matter, not my problem. I turned and decided to return to the monastery, but found my steps heavy. Behind me the beating continued. Not my problem. The old man started begging for mercy. The begging continued, now with a blood-gurgling voice. I quickly turned around. Upon witnessing blood flowing down from the old man's mouth, I snapped. "What are you people doing? Stop it." The assault abruptly stopped as I had hoped, but there was a new problem: everyone was looking at me. Oops, there goes my shadow walk. All around me people went quiet. My sudden appearance, together with my matching appearance with their fabled saint, must have bewildered them. There was no going back now, might as well do what I blew my cover for. I started walking towards the bullies while glaring at them. They got the message and stepped back from their victim. I reached the wounded old man and squatted down to check on him. "Are you all right?" I asked. The old man started to answer weakly as he looked up. When he saw me, his expression turned from despair to shock. "It is fine now," I assured him. "Surely the sister hospitallers back in the monastery can do something about his injuries." The crowd around started murmuring and my transhuman hearing heard them all. "Is that? Where did she come from? I swear no one was there just now. No way. This could get messy, I needed to get back as soon as possible. Can you stand? I can get you some help." I offered the old man my hand. Still shocked, he took it and stood back up shakily. Just as we were about to leave, our path was blocked by the man in carapace armor with his palm raised, signaling us to stop. Being this close, I finally recognized his armor and half-mask to be the standard-issue wargear of the Adeptus Arbits, the imperial law enforcers of Imperium. While the Arbits were quite a major faction in the law, they were more brutal Central Bureau police force than a military force. As a result, they were never a complete playable army by themselves, and I was not familiar with them. The officer first looked me up and down, then talked into his comm, telling his unit he was investigating a possible case of thrill seeker before finally turning to me. With an authoritative voice he asked, "Mamsel, are you alone?" Mamsel. Just as I was starting to get used to being called a lady, he had to hit me with that cringe again, together with the man's inaction when the assault happened right in front of him. I had a very low opinion of him at this point. Still, I had to answer to avoid further troubles. "Yes." The man nodded before dropping his bombshell statement. "Do you have a written permission from any Ministorum representative to dress up like that? Impersonating a saint or a potential saint candidate without proper authorization is a criminal offense under the local code of Lex Imperialis." Wait, what? Is he serious? The law did mention about Arbits not caring much about petty crimes, instead focusing on central imperial laws, kind of like how the FBI will not bat an eye if you litter in front of them. Even so, assault was considered a petty crime for them. "No, I do not have written permission," I answered truthfully. "Then I will have to arrest you. Show me your identity." Whoa. Experiencing the brunt imperial law for the first time, I was taken aback. Seeing that I did not respond, the officer drew his baton menacingly and barked his order, "Mamsel, I am not going to repeat that order again. But I am not impersonating anyone, I said without thinking, which in hindsight, was obviously the wrong answer for him. The officer's chin under the half-mask visibly tensed up. I could even read what was on his mind. You little twat. I bet you usually have things your way with that pretty face. Wait. I can read minds now? Final warning. Give me your identity, he said with a voice so dangerous it snapped me back and made all the people around, including the wounded old man, step further back. Like an ID card or something?
I'm sorry, I don't have one.
As soon as I uttered my answer, his thought came through again. That's it. I will teach you a lesson. Shockingly, in the next instance he actually swung his baton at me, someone with the appearance of an unarmed girl. The crowd gasped at the sudden attack, but what was supposedly a very tense moment quickly became weird. I watched in disbelief as the weapon came at me at a snail's pace and dodged it easily by stepping aside. Surprised, the officer quickly collected himself and tried for the second time. Again the baton moved sluggishly through the air. This time I took a step back and observed the tip of the baton gliding right in front of me at a laughable speed. Is he even trying? I risked a glance at my assailant. The man's expression was far too serious to be fooling around. I even saw a cloud of angry emotions hanging over him. His intention to beat me up was real, but he was just too slow. Wait, is he slow or am I fast? The officer swung for the third time, again attacking with the same lethargic speed. I was no longer nervous and glanced around to confirm my hunch. To my amazement, from the crowd's movement to the flowing of banners, everything seemed to be moving at less than half speed from my point of view. I was possibly in my peak form for the first time. The mere tightening of my focus seemed to make everything go slower, so there was no need to fire up thought acceleration. The officer was not slow. I am way too fast for him. Confident in the difference of our physical capability, I reached out and grabbed hold of the baton mid-swing, easily yanking it off his hand like taking candy from a baby. Not realizing he was disarmed, the man continued his clumsy strike and was fully exposed for counterattack. I felt a strange new sensation and in the blink of an eye, saw a myriad of ways to end his life. A hand chop to the neck would fatally crush his throat. A direct elbow smash into the back of his head should result in a lethal concussion even with that helmet. A knee jab into his chest would break enough ribcage for the bones to puncture his own lungs, drowning him on land. A quick grab and twist would break his neck, and an extra twist could probably decapitate him with my strength. I had so many options to end him now. He is so fragile. Even wearing that full body armor, to me he looked no more than a defenseless sand castle on the beach. While I looked at him with a newfound perspective, the man finally regained his stance and our eyes met. I have no idea what he saw, but in the next instance he recoiled in horror and took multiple steps back. The crowd around us was getting thicker at this point and I figured it would be better to de-escalate the situation. Please, stop, I said while flipping the baton and offered the handle to him. The man blinked at the baton, finally noticed his empty hand and looked totally dumbfounded. He panicked, took a few steps back, quickly called into his comms for backup. That done, he drew a pistol, pointed it at me while yelling in a shaky tone, "Stop resisting." I was flabbergasted. Despite all my attempts to resolve this situation peacefully, it still ended up like this. The human side of me flinched at the sight of a gun, but another part of me seemed to be nonchalant about it as it was merely an auto pistol. Merely a pistol? Surprised by my own thoughts, I stood still just as two more individuals wearing the same uniform appeared from the crowd with their weapons pointing at me while shouting conflicting orders. One of them was asking me to raise my hands while another was telling me to get down on my knees. The first man was chiming in, asking me to drop the baton that I had offered to him. Such a nuisance. This reminded me of all the horrible incidents made by the less than ideal law enforcement personnel back on my mundane earth. A wrong move here and a normal person would be dead. But I was anything but normal now. A myriad of options flashed before my mind. First, I could unleash my halo to intimidate them, but that might create a bigger scene with all the pilgrims around. Otherwise fleeing was also an option. With my speed I could get out of dodge easily, but that would risk the life of bystanders should these guys simply start shooting indiscriminately. Lastly, there was the option of going fully on the offensive. If I activated thought acceleration and went all out, taking down all three of them within seconds before leaving the scene was a given. They were just humans after all. Just humans? Startled by my own unfamiliar chilling thoughts, I froze. Meanwhile, emboldened by my inaction and their numbers, with weapons in hand, the three officers stepped closer while repeating their contradicting orders. Their aggressiveness vexed me greatly. A non-violent scenario seemed impossible at this point. My grip on the baton tightened, multiple solutions to incapacitate the three of them flashed before my mind. All right, you guys asked for. Cease your blasphemy. Fortunately, an amplified voice which I recognized stopped me from acting out my plan. The new development had the three officers turning their heads at the direction of a parting crowd. They're a short distance away, graced by the lights of early sun. Sister Wellmanor in her usual dialogus attire stepped forth while brandishing a staff topped with a sororitas icon. The built-in Lord Haler on her robes was again blasting orders. By the order of the Adepta Sororitas, stand down. Upon seeing the arrival of a furious sister, the three officers complied and lowered their weapons. After staring down the arbits, Wellmanor turned to me. Not expecting to meet up with her under such circumstances, I dropped the baton, smiled to cover the awkwardness, and said the only thing that came to my mind. "Good morning, Wellmanor." It was then I had a proper look at the scholar. She seemed to have exerted herself coming here. The sweat on her forehead shone like diamonds reflecting the early sunlight. Wellmanor struggled to control her ragged breathing, and she had a somewhat stupefied expression while staring straight at me, her lips trembling slightly. On one of her hands was a communication device with a voice calling out from it. "Sister Wellmanor? Say again, have you located the Holy Daughter?" "Affirmative, I found her," Wellmanor said, but in her haste to reply she had forgotten her Lord Haler was still switched on, so that message was blasted all around us. We both winced at the accident. While she hurriedly turned off her Lord Haler, a message appeared in my vision. "Combat detected.